Here on the Random Junk Channel, we're going to start doing discussions or talks or interviews with different people from different ages and different eras with different experiences, just to give you perspectives on people's lives and kind of bring up history. Depending on how or where you grew up, history will be different. Some of the talks may be slightly offensive depending on your perspective, and most of them are just real talks with real people about real things that really happened. It's not necessarily political. It's just so we don't forget history. We don't forget what happened in the past or things that have happened to people that experiences may not relate to yours. You weren't privy to it, whether you got misinformation or no information or what have you. So we're not changing our format in the sense of repairs. We're still going to be doing lots of repairs. We're not going to change on the random taste testing of odd cereals or expired foods or so on and so forth. We are going to just add to our list of things that we do, and that's all. So this first interview or discussion or talk, however you want to word it, is of a person who was drafted into Vietnam War and their experiences from draft to retirement with some highlights, and gives you a perspective from a branch of the service that most people don't realize were in the Vietnam War. Also what it looks like from their perspective of the war and the things we did from this person's perspective. We may be doing some more of these in the future with other people who are in different wars, such as Iraq, Iran, which is the 90s wars, Desert Storm, Desert Freedom or something. I can't remember right at the moment. But the point is it's just to bring back some of the history that we've all lived through. And that way you can see or hear or maybe understand a different point of view. So the next interview, or the first one that follows this little statement, is rather long. You don't have to watch it if you don't want to. But if you do want to watch it, great, I appreciate it. Any comments, of course, are appreciated. Just leave them below. But we're going to start it now, and then we'll get more in the future, and stay tuned for also the standard more repairs. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Roger Lewis, formerly of the Coast Guard. Way back when I had hair, I enlisted, but before that I got drafted. So I enlisted on my way down to the draft board, and I went into the Coast Guard, and September 8th they said, sign here. I did. I went to boot camp, got out of boot camp December 11th in Alameda, California.
What year?
1964. And my boot camp forming company was Mike 44, and that place no longer exists. It is now an MLC, which is where I ended 26 years of service, in the same place I started as a boot. Once getting to boot camp, I did 13 weeks of boot camp, and the Coast Guard's boot camp is longer than the rest of the services. They range anywhere from 5 to 8 weeks. Coast Guard was 13. It's a little bit longer, a little bit tougher, and we used to learn how to row boats so we could go out in the surf and rescue people. Not that that's what I did. When I got out of boot camp, I ended up on a ship. I didn't even know the Coast Guard had ships. My first ship was built in World War II. They chopped out an engine room to make it 255 feet long for fast war production instead of 355 feet long, which is the design for the ship. It was an old steamship. They don't make those anymore. However, most ships of that generation from World War II are steamships, coal-fired or diesel-fired, most of them being coal. That's where the Black Gang name came from, the people that stoked the boilers. And at the end of a shift, you were black with coal dust. So after boot camp, went to a ship called the Wachusett. It was stationed out of Seattle, Washington. I got on board on December 11th, and then we went out to sea 10 days later. Went out to sea in a storm. That's the first time I've been on a ship in a storm. It's pretty interesting. But we headed on up to Alaska and went up further north than most people do because we were up in the Bering Sea. Nobody goes up there anymore except for commercial fishermen. The Aleutian Islands, the Pribilofs, all the islands up there, we were going around doing what's called a fishery patrol. We shake down all the Japanese fishing boats to see what they had on board because they were not allowed to just freely fish. They could only take certain species of fish. So we would board virtually everybody, which is a smelly job because the fish just really don't have a rosy smell to them. And then they had ships, including the Russians that were up there, that are big, huge commercial factory ships. A small fishing boat unloads, goes into the factory ship, they process it, it comes out into cans, frozen, whatever, filleted, you name it, the way you would buy it in a grocery store, however they disperse it in Japan or Russia, I don't know, but that ship does everything. So when they come into port, they just offload the ship and it's ready for consumption. But that was one of the trips that we usually make. That was about every 6 months we'd go up north. Now we'd be relieved by another ship who'd be doing the same thing, so it never stopped. The other thing that this particular ship I was on did was called Ocean Station. We used to go to Ocean Stations November and Victor. Those are areas of the Pacific. They're a 210-mile perimeter. And these are the flying routes from the United States to overseas for the aircraft. Because back in 1966, a plane came down, and back then they were all propeller planes, and landed in the ocean, and they had to be picked up. So they decided, the Department of Transportation or somebody or another, decided we better put ships on station halfway between so we could actually get to those aircraft if the necessity showed itself, and rescue the crew, the passengers, and everybody else. Those are our standard routine, but we could go anywhere the government sent us. I have seen 2 active volcanoes back before volcanoes were shown in the newspapers and news media. I've watched them blow up out at sea. We've been standing by to rescue people off those islands. The ship got full of volcanic ash, which is sulfuric acid. So when we wash it down with seawater, which is what comes out the fire hoses, you have a problem. It burns the paint, but it still has to be washed off. So we just wash it off back into the ocean. So I've been around the world 3 times, compliments of the Coast Guard. One of the little trips I did was 2 tours in Vietnam, which I re-enlisted for. I was a gunner's mate, and as such, this is what I was trained for. But I had an enlistment that was up in 8 days, so they asked me if I wanted to go or not. So I thought about it for probably a couple hours. I said, you know, generation before me, my old man's generation, they all went to war. They didn't have a choice. If it wasn't World War II, it was the Korean War. And I said, well, I'll never know if I can take that or not, but that's what I'm trained for. So I re-enlisted, went to Vietnam on my first tour, and halfway through the tour, we had registered 105 kills, and then the commandant or the commodore over in Vietnam for us probably decided, well, we're the Coast Guard, we're a life-saving operation, we're not supposed to be out here killing people. So they told us we could no longer keep body counts. So the last half of that tour, we didn't. My second tour, the same thing applied. We couldn't keep any body counts, any nothing, because we don't go to war. Well, that's a crock. We ran all the landing craft in World War II because the Navy didn't. Coast Guard personnel on Navy ships ran landing craft. It's a very, very difficult boat to maneuver. Coast Guard is exclusively trained to do that. We were in every war around. Even in the sand wars that have been going on recently, we've got people over there as bodyguards, not on a ship. They are actual bodyguards, fully armed like everybody else. They look like everybody else, except they have a Coast Guard patch, which nobody knows. My first tour in Vietnam, the first casualties the Coast Guard encountered was an 8-man crew on a swift, not a swift boat, but one of our boats. The Navy had the swift boats. One of our 82-footers, when the Air Force came in and blew it out of the water and killed everybody. They took credit for a kill. Unfortunately, it was us. It was a friendly fire kill. We never returned fire. After that, that ain't the case. Plane comes in, friendly or otherwise, all guns mount to go up and take a look at it. But, I mean, I've been in various firefights. They're kind of interesting. They light up the night. They're really cool. You know, tracers go out red, come back white. Those are theirs. Ours are red. Most times we're just shooting, in my ship, shooting 5-inch cannon, which would be a 105 for the landlocked folks. And then they shoot back recoilless rockets. I don't have it here. It's in the other room. I happen to have one from a ship that we blew up and sank that the Navy recovered for us. But, I mean, that's just the nature of the war. Everybody says, well, did you kill anybody? I says, I'm sure I did. I know I killed at least one because I had him in my sights and shot him from 9 miles away. And it was a near miss, but when a 5-inch projectile goes off, everything within 30 yards is going to die or get destroyed. And I watched the guy go up in the scope. Arms came off, legs came off, head came off, and then the body went up. It just kind of faded away. So I know he was dead. But he was my target. You know, I could have shot at trucks or structures, but this guy was walking on the beach or running on the beach, whatever, I don't remember. But he was a prime target, and I see if I could hit him, and I got come damn close. But after 2 tours, each time I had re-enlisted, or extended my enlistment by 2 years so I could go again, I volunteered for a 3rd one, and the Coast Guard denied that one. So he either thought I was nuts and crazy or whatever, but I didn't make my 3rd tour. But ultimately, I ended up 26 years in the service. I came out as a W-4, which is the highest pay grade for warrant officers. Those are specialty officers. I am trained in shipboard armament, any weapons that the Coast Guard uses, and explosives. I've been to 3 different explosive loading schools. I created the new criteria for the explosive loading program for the Coast Guard, and I went to 3 EOD schools, one from the Air Force, one from the Army, and one from the Marines. And that's what those guys do for a living. That's, if you're not familiar with it, they take explosives apart so that they can be safely blown up somewhere else and not kill anybody who comes across it. So that's kind of an art in itself. And they ran the schools. To my knowledge, when I got out, I'm the only person in the Coast Guard that's been to EOD school 3 times. But it's interesting. One of the schools I was in, I had a crew with me that we were training to handle explosives on my behalf. I mean, I do the blasting, but I have to have grunts move explosives out to wherever we're going to use them. And he did not properly set an explosive in the ground. It has to be exploded, because now that we've attempted to explode it, the explosives themselves become sensitized. The military explosives are pretty much insensitive to anything until you try to set them off, and if they don't go off, now you have a problem. So the instructors don't do that. They know better. The people that screwed it up do it. But I was in charge of this whole detail, so I took this guy by the shirt and stood him at attention right next to his explosives, and I dug a hole and did a countermine and got him the hell out of there, blew it up. Everything was fine after that, and he was no longer assigned to me for explosive loading, handling, or whatever, should I need to do so. And we also, dog, we also use explosives out in the ice. I've been to the Arctic and the Antarctic. Explosives in the ice are necessary if an icebreaker can't go through. I've been on 2 classes of icebreakers. The second class I was on was the biggest that we have. They're 400-foot icebreakers, and they can steam through 22 feet of ice. They don't have to back and ram. They just go, and they will break 22 feet ice. Think of it as 2 stories of ice. That's how powerful those ships are. They run on gas turbines made by General Electric, 25,000 horsepower each. They put all 3 of those turbines online, and there ain't much going to stop them unless you're over 22 feet of ice. Then you back up and ram it, and it'll still go through more ice. The first one was a diesel ship. It would only do 12 to 14 feet of ice, steady steaming, before they had to back and ram. But if you get either one of those stuck, because there's an international ice patrol, any country with icebreakers that are in the vicinity, if you get stuck in the ice, you put out a call for help. That's the only people that can help you is another icebreaker. But while you're waiting, if you've got people on board like myself, you go out in the ice with explosives and blow the ice to form cracks. All you're doing is weakening the ice. You cannot destroy ice. Way back after the Titanic, the Navy put out $1 million reward for anybody to figure out a way to destroy ice. That reward is still there. $1 million isn't worth what it was back at the turn of the century, but you still cannot blow up ice. You can blow a hole in it, you can create cracks in it, and that's all you need. With a crack or a fissure of any size, you can take that icebreaker, either back it out of there or continue blasting your way through. You can just set charges. Wherever you got to go, you can do that, but you need to be trained for this. That's where I come in with having 3 of these schools for that training. And to my knowledge, I was the last one to do that, but I had an interest in it. Blowing stuff up is fun. I got news for you. It's the greatest thing in the world. Have you ever played with firecrackers and put them in tin cans and got a frog to lay on one or whatever? So it's really fun. So I enjoyed the schools. Anybody got any questions?
What are some of the highlights you had or memorable moments during the tours in Vietnam, boat tours?
Being shot at. You look outside the gun, because it's an encased gun, and they had all the doors open and the vents open because it's kind of hot and humid over there. You look outside and you can see the tail flames of rockets going by right above the deck. They're shooting at us specifically, not just the ship. They want the gun shot out. That'll get your attention, though. Because I had a guy freak out and had to throw him out of the gun and close the goddamn doors up because I didn't need anybody else freaking out. I've had a gun that tried to kill us, actually. So it was just 2 of us left in the gun out of a 9-man gun crew. I threw them all out of there. I loaded it, I shot it, and I had one other guy aiming it. Well, I did all the manual labor to bring the ammunition up, put it in a tray, ram it home, and then after we made 2 or 3 shots, we'd use a gas ejection system because the gas ejection trip lever broke, and the gases that come out of a powder tank after you've shot it are very explosive. So the normal routine is you shoot, and as it recoils, it trips the gas ejection system, and a big blast of air goes right up the barrel and takes all those explosive gases with it. Makes it safe for the next shot. Well, I didn't have time to make it safe. We were being shot at. So about every 3 rounds, I would trip it manually because the trip lever broke itself. And that was kind of interesting, but I got a medal for that. It's my job. I don't need a medal. The thing is, preservation of life, my life. But that's just the way it is in combat. You do what you got to do to get the day through.
What else?
What else? Well, let me see.
I mean, it can be whether you're on the boat or shore leave.
Well, I've been rolled in the Philippines. Guy pulled a knife on me in a taxi cab. What he didn't expect is I grabbed the knife by the blade and I was pushing it back towards him, but the Filipinos are a close-knit group and they're all coming to see what was going on. I said, well, I can't take them all on at the same time, but what surprised this dumbass was I actually grabbed the knife by this blade and pushing it back at him. All he had to do, if he'd have thought about it, was just pull back and cut all my fingers loose. But he didn't. So that night I went out and I bought 2 knives, a butterfly knife and a switchblade, and I went looking for this dumb bastard because I was going to kill him. I mean, I've been killing Vietnamese here for 6-8 months already. I don't give a shit about a Filipino. I just had to find him. The guy went with me because he didn't believe it. I said, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. He says, can I go with you? I said, sure. So I bought 2 knives, and he just watched, and we went looking for this cab driver. Never did find him. He was lucky, because he'd have been a dead son of a bitch. Let me see. What else did I do?
Weren't you in a bar fight where you gotta...
Oh, hell yeah, I've been in bar fights. I used to be picked up as shore patrol all the time. I was a designated shore patrol. I'm not entirely sure why, other than the fact that I don't care. It comes with a job. You know, I'm a gunner's mate. And historically, gunner's mates and bosun mates were picked for shore patrol because they're usually more physical than anybody else on the ship based on the type of work we do. It keeps you in trim, to say the least. I was in Hong Kong, and they got a call that there was a bar fight going on. I had some little engineer with me. So we went to this bar and opened up these double doors, and the first thing I saw was like in the old movies. Here's a guy coming from my right, airborne, at about chest level, to my left, and out of sight. Somebody threw him. I was impressed. That was the bar fight, just like you see in the old movies. And that's what we went into and broke it up. And you break it up with what they gave us billy clubs, but you know, chairs work too, bottles, anything that's at hand. That's not the bar fight that put the scar in my head. That was up in Iceland. That was a different bar fight. Same situation. I got nailed, didn't even know it till the next day. Ah, shit. Bar fights are neat, but not if you're shore patrol, because you are a target. I mean, there's always multiple targets in a bar fight, but if you come in, you represent law and order. They ain't afraid of that. I mean, but I do have a stick, and I know how to use it. I can crush your throat. I can rupture your diaphragm. They taught us how not to do that, because otherwise he could be taken up on charges. But hey, he moved, so it was just a near miss. That's not what I was looking for. You know, break a kneecap. There's all kinds of things you can do with a baton. Cops do it all the time. They use a bigger baton than we had. That's the one with a stick on the side, so they can hold it this way and they can spin it. We didn't use those. We used the old-fashioned nightsticks.
Yeah,
they're pretty effective.
A miniature baseball bat.
That's about what it amounts to. They're about 12, 14 inches long. The good ones are made out of oak because they're heavier. The crummy ones, cheap knockoffs, are made out of pine. Both are hard to break, but one is heavier, which works in your behalf. But I've been through a couple of those, you know, major bar fights. I've broken up some fights where I got my shipmates out of the bar before the cops got there, the real cops. I said, get the hell out of here. What are you talking? Get the hell out of here. It says the cops are coming down. And the Japanese, an example, have no sense of humor, period, for anybody. One of our guys got away from a fight by jumping the wall. Well, the problem was that the old Tuxture, he was an electrician, the wall he jumped was a Marine brig. He landed right in their courtyard. And he was there for a week. He could not get them to believe he was there by accident. He wasn't sent there for disciplinary action. But he was lucky because the Japanese couldn't get to him because they'd have had his ass. And it took some diplomatic things to get him out of there because they didn't have orders putting him there, and they couldn't get orders for him to get back out because there was no orders to connect it. Somebody from the State Department finally did something that got him out, escorted back the ship, and he couldn't leave the ship the whole time we were in Japan. But that's just the way it is when you travel overseas. You gotta abide by the country's laws that you're in. You can't do things you would do in the United States and get away with it in a lot of cases. They frown on that, have no sense of humor. Japan being probably the toughest. Singapore is pretty bad too. They have more damn laws than there are pages in the Bible. And I used to wear a t-shirt that said, "You can't spit on the street. It's a fine or jail time. You can't litter on the street. You can't take a pack of chewing gum and drop any of that on the street." In Singapore, you basically, all you can do is breathe. They got so damn many laws. And you're required to know this when you hit the port. They'll give you a cheat sheet. This is what you can't do. They don't tell you what you can do. They just tell you what you can't do. Because if they catch you, it's a guaranteed fine and or imprisonment time. And it range anywhere from a couple of days to a year for nickel-dime things.
If you got arrested by them, was you considered AWOL in the military, or how did the military take care of it?
No, you'd be AWOL because you're not back. But if you get arrested by them, case in point, some diplomat's kid was doing graffiti on a building, and he was caned in public, just like they do to everybody else. And then they deported him back to the United States. I don't know what happened to the old man. He probably got recalled back to the United States, but they don't care who you are. I thought that was great. This guy was defacing their property, public property, and they tied him to a light pole and caned the shit out of him. Stripped his ass down to his ankles, and that was it. Thought that was great. But that's Singapore. I mean, they have no sense of humor for nobody. They don't care who you are. You might be God, but you better be able to walk on water and walk away.
Didn't you hide stuff in the magazine on the ship?
Oh, hell, I used to bring beer. And I was supposed to, but I was in charge of multiple magazines under lock and key, and the ships would always take beer. We'd have happy hours once every couple of weeks on the weekend, and they issue everybody 2 cans of beer. So I just find out what brand they were putting on board, because we bring it in by the truckload. So I'd buy the same brand, and I put it in a different magazine. So I had my beer, and the ship crew had their beer. They'd get 2, I'd get a 6-pack. I'd get the 2 from the ship, and then have a 6-pack of my own. And the only other people who knew about it was the guys that worked for me. So, because they'd help me bring it aboard. But I also used my first ship, hell, I made beer on it in the armory. I took a grease bucket, and when we get cans of grease, I mean, they are big cans. They're 35-gallon and more cans of grease. Cleaned one out, lined it with plastic, and then I went to the cooks, got yeast, got molasses, got sugar, got everything, and I made top fermenting beer. Back then, they used to call it top fermenting mead, because I couldn't make a proper batch of beer, but I could make a proper batch of mead. And one of my guys, like a dumbass, before it was ripe and ready to drink, he started drinking it, got himself drunk, fell down a goddamn ladder. Well, that's just the way it works. On a ship, everything's got ladders. Nothing's flat. So he's out of commission for a day, sprung a leg. But nobody other than the ordnance department knew I was making beer.
Hey.
And everybody helped. the cooks knew what I was doing because I had to get like raisins and shit from them so I could get the sugar content because I couldn't get raw sugar. So I used raisins to get sugar. And that's how come I turned into mead instead of regular beer. But you do what you got to do. I took all this from watching Phil Silvers on TV when he was a sergeant in the Army, and he wheeled and dealed. So I wheeled and dealed. I said, shit, and that was pretty slick. I just took this and put it into real life. I had a slush fund. Shit, I was making more money than the captain. Bought a Porsche when I came back my first tour. And it says I owned 3 motorcycles because I had them as collateral. Everybody, I had people many pay grades above me come to me for a loan. And I kept 2 sets of books. One locked up in the Army and one locked up in my locker in case I lost a set. But everybody was in whatever they wanted, whatever they needed, I'd limit it to about $300 because that's about all you're going to get paid per payday anyway. And we paid in cash on a ship. I've been on money runs just to go get money for the ship so we could head to sea and make our payments to the crew. And in a lot of foreign ports, if they don't have any if they don't have anything with the State Department say we're coming in and we're going to pay the bill, you'd have to pay it in cash, so the ship would pay it outright and just put out greenbacks. Greenbacks are worth a lot of money overseas, more so than their money, no matter where we were. It's black market money. So I was always an armed guard for that. I have no idea why I was always picked, but I was. Whether it was because I was junior or didn't give a shit, been in combat, I have no clue, but I have made many, many, many money runs. Scared the shit out of a lot of people because I carried a shotgun.
Winchester?
Actually, it was a Model 97 Winchester. And so you stand outside of the accounting room in a bank, and civilians come walking in, and you see wide eyes and nothing else. I said, ooh, you can't get past the door unless you get past me first. Simple as that. Nobody in, nobody out until they let me know they were coming out. And then I would escort my guys back to our car, back to the ship. Done that many times. Ended up doing that as a civilian, too, for places I worked. Same thing. But maybe it's just the way I look. I don't care. I've been shot at, and I've shot back. It's the way it is if you're in the military. Well, I can't say if you're in the military. It depends where you were in the military. But again, most people don't know the Coast Guard is part of the military or done anything at all that I've done. But we've done it before everybody else, because 1792, we set up the revenue service and flagged down ships and got their money from them, from tax money. It goes way, way, way back. Coast Guard's actually the oldest service.
Yeah, because they changed their name. It was the SOS.
Back then it was the Treasury Service. And that's who we used to work for, the Department of the Treasury.
Yeah, but it wasn't the Coast Guard. They had a different name.
No, it was the Revenue Cutter Service, is what it was called. The name has been changed a couple of times. Whoever owns this, change the name, naming rights. Kind of like buying a stadium.
What about the other services that you were with? Because you were on a boat that was in front of Navy boats. How did you interact with the other branches that were there during Vietnam, whether it's on ship or shore?
In Vietnam, we're all in the same boat, literally. I mean, we all had the same sight line. This is what we want to do. Now, some of the people within any of the services, you saw pictures of helping out the villagers, first aid kind of stuff, to send a corpsman ashore or a doctor ashore and treat them for beriberi or anything that they may have come across. But beyond that splinter group from every service, because they all have medical personnel, the rest of us, kill as many as you can. That was my concept. That was my job.
Yeah, but what about your interactions with them when you're on
shore?
No,
when we're on the beach, we all, brag about it here and there. One thing you couldn't do, though, with the Kiwis, which are the New Zealanders, or the Brits, you couldn't say fuck the Queen, because they would come unglued. I mean, that was an instant bar fight right there on the spot. That didn't go over. I mean, beyond that, you could do any damn thing you wanted, but not with anybody from the UK. They were just a bit touchy about their queen. And they were right up until she died here a couple of years ago.
Didn't you, I think they call it, tactically acquire some of the other services equipment?
Oh, yeah, I used to steal. LSTs were notorious for putting USO groups on board, and because they're flat. And everybody would go and goggle the ladies and from the USO tour, dancing, singing, this and that. Bob Hope is cracking jokes and shit. So while they're doing this and you can't get around, I went down their magazines and helped myself to hand grenades and anything else I could carry out and put on my ship. Did that all the time. And they never knew the difference. We all wore the same uniform. We're all dungarees, literally. Chambray shirts and bell-bottom pants. Same uniform.
Did you take them from the Navy, the Army?
I take them from the Navy. I mean, that's because we're out at sea when they do this. Those LSTs are, 5 miles out, 10 miles out, 12 miles out, whatever. We're basically at a gun range from the beach. And they would tie up alongside each other, we being a bigger ship. Now, I knew the layout of their ships. I don't know if they knew the layout of our ships, but I'd studied the Navy ships because that was part of my learning to be a gunner's mate, because it all started with the Navy ships, the bigger ships. So I would help ourselves to some armament that somebody else got in a trouble for because their count didn't come up right when doing inventory in a magazine, and they're missing a few hundred of this or that. But that's the way it goes. And I'm sure we all did that. One thing I learned in my first tour, there was shortages of things. The Marines couldn't get knives, sheath knives. They wanted sheath knives. So, on my second tour, I brought back K-bars. The Aussies couldn't get pencils, what they called the chart marker. That's the term they use for a goddamn number 2 yellow pencil. So I bought boxes of pencils. This is trading stock. I traded, I forget what the hell it was. It wasn't nothing that ain't special, for a refrigerator. And then my ship wouldn't let me put it down in the armory. I had a full-size refrigerator in marine green, I guess they called it avocado. It's brand new. It's still in the box, the shipping container. I said, you could trade anything for anything. You just had to know how to do it. This is what Phil Silvers depicted on Sergeant Bilko in the TV programs. I learned from that. This has got to be true. This can't be just made up. This has got to come from shit that's happened in World War II and Korea. And yes, it does happen. I traded more crap. Shit. Buying guns for $5. These are American-made weapons. $5. 1911 45 with pearl grips. I mean, real pearl. $5. The guys couldn't believe it. It says, what do I do? It says, bring it to me in the armory. I change the grips and just put it in with all the other 45s. It looks the same. It says, when we hit port, It says, you can check it back out. It's yours. I said, put your Pro grips back on it, and off you go. You got yourself a $5.45. That's a good gun.
Not anymore. No more $5.
You get M16s. They were a dime a dozen, but the M16s that we had over there, compliments of bad ammo, which caused a lot of carbon. The M16s would seize up. And that was because there was this dickhead named McNamara, who I swear to God, if I ever saw him, I would cross 6 lanes of LA freeway traffic so I could go over there and kill him. And one guy really, really, really wanted to kill barehanded. He caused more American deaths than anything else. Planes coming out of the air because the wings come off. He used inventory from World War II. These planes have been through a lot. They were never designed to go more than maybe 20 missions. And then everything gets metal fatigue. So if you do dive bombs and this and that, the wings kind of actually flap. Well, when they're doing these same kind of dive bombs in Vietnam, the wings go flap one time and come off. So now you got a kamikaze plane. A lot of planes did that. When they ran out of World War II stock, then they went to Korean stock. That's when we got jets over there. Same shit. It's old military stuff. It ain't meant to go beyond its lifespan. But he's the one that decided if you take 16-inch powder bags, which are 50-pound bags, you use 6 of those to shoot a projectile. The grain of powder is literally about 3/8 of an inch long. It's tetrahedral in shape. Comes to a point on either end, 6 sides. And it's got little bitty holes in it, so it has a clean burn, burns instantly all at once. Well, if you grind that up, it's small enough to make M16 ammo. Look at all that savings we have. The problem is that cannon powder is FGGGG. Burns really, really, really slow with a lot of muscle. Pistol powder is triple F. GGG, it's fast burn. M16 powder is like pistol powder. It burns really, really fast. Well, this really, really slow cannon powder doesn't burn clean. That's what gummed up all the M16s. If you didn't clean them right away, within 24 hours, you get one shot off and it wouldn't cycle the bolt. The bolt was frozen into place. So we used to put some of our guys over on the Navy Swift boats, which is a 54-foot shallow water boat, and run them up the rivers. And I would send them over with my M16s because mine were maintained. These guys, I'm sure they maintain them as best as they could, but they don't have an armory. I mean, they have a 7-man crew on a boat that's 54 feet long. It has a galley and a shitter and, not a whole lot else, a few bunks. There's no armory on the ship, on the boat. Well, every once in a while they would lose an M16. It would freeze up for that reason. So we just sent them over maintained with ours. One of the guys, Havner, is a second-class machinist mate, went over, and he had a Navy M16 shot out of his hands. Literally, the bullet went, clipped the tip of his thumb off, went through the M16, blew it apart, which I said, okay, well, it wasn't mine, so I don't have to do the paperwork on it. Why is it lost in combat? But it shattered his thumb, so they took him off their Swift boat and put him on one of their destroyers, or some larger vessel that had medical personnel on it, and they were going to cut his thumb off. And I said, no, you're not. I said, yeah, it's the only way we can save your thumb. So I had equipped him with K-bar knives. And he pulled one out and held it on the second-class corpsman, and they come unglued, and they sent him back to our ship because he was unruly, and they're going to put him up for court-martial. And says, do whatever you want. He ain't losing his thumb. You don't understand. You need your thumb, same as you need your big toe. It affects everything you do. You lose either one of those digits. They put him on our ship. We had a surgeon. He took care of the finger. He was in a cast for a while till it all healed back up, but his thumb had literally shattered right down to where it connects to the wrist when that bullet went through. So, but he's fine. He's a machinist mate. He can do his job again. He can turn wrenches. He can rebuild engines. That's what he did. But after he got shot, the skipper decided, well, it ain't worth trying to lose another crew member, so they quit letting us go ride swift boats. And I went to a school for the new Automolaire piece of shit French-built gun. It's all electronic. It does shoot fast, 75 rounds a minute. You cannot be in the gun because it'll kill you inside, which is, since we adopted it, has been upgraded to 110 rounds a minute, which is pretty heavy for a cannon. That's a lot of shooting. But I went to school with another warrant gunner who was the most decorated guy in the Coast Guard. He's got air medals from the Army, he's got air medals from the Navy, he's got air medals from the Air Force. On his days off, and he was on an 82-footer, and they run up and down the river shooting shit up, he'd go hitch a ride somewhere and go back into combat. He was in combat 7 days a week. Loved it. But he had a chest full of medals you wouldn't believe, and they had a inspection where we had to go out and dress blues and shiny shoes. The Commodore would come unglued because he's got a whole chest full of medals like you see nowadays because they give them away like candy. And they looked in his records, and he was authorized every one of them. And they come unglued. What are you doing going with the Navy and the Army and the Air Force and this and that? I says, that's what I do. It's my job. I'm a gunner's mate. Well, they stopped that too because of him. But he had, I guess, about 6-8 months into his tour, he had like 32 medals, most of them coming from other services. But he killed a lot of people, shot down a lot of shit, sunk a lot of boats. He was just another guy like me, another gunner's mate. But at the time, we were both warrant gunners. I mean, when I came out 26 years later as a W-4 warrant gunner, highest the Coast Guard has, the other services all have W-5s. We only have W-4s. And they tried to entice me to stay in for one more tour. We'll make you a W-5. You can't. That takes an act of Congress, and they're not going to make me a W-5 just because the others have W-5s. I'm a W-4. Simple as that. I'm as high as I can go. Third seniorest guy in my specialty of the Coast Guard, which is a warrant gunner with, again, weapons specialist and explosive specialist. The explosive specialist, there was nobody else that was considered an explosives expert. I was it. That's why I could rewrite the school for it. But this other guy, so he used to hook trips when we were in Vietnam, and we knew about it when I was there. I never met him until I was in school with him years later, but heard about this guy that was go everywhere, shoot anything, any boat, any aircraft. He didn't care. He kind of liked combat. Simple as that.
What about the hardest boat to take down?
We had a ship that we were in a firefight with that their crew was not the normal zipperhead. It was the, I forget what it was, 82nd Division, their Army, hardcore Army on a boat, not the Vietnamese Navy. So we were in a firefight with it, and it was taking on 5 of us at the same time. It took down 2 helicopters out of the air. It took down the Antelope, which is a super fast attack 125-foot Navy vessel. Single turbine comes out the ass end, and that son of a bitch would do like 52 knots across the water. That is really, really fast. Took that sucker and almost sank it, put a hole through it. They had a seagoing tug put around into the hull, and they asked us if we had anybody who could take it out, and I said, I ain't doing it. The round stuck in the hull Well, it was a minesweeper. I'm taking it back. It wasn't a tug. It was a minesweeper because it had a 3-inch thick oak hull, so it won't set off magnetic mines, the ones in the water. But that oak hull was just soft enough the projectile could go in, but it wouldn't explode it. It had to be steel to explode. Well, I said, no, I ain't doing that. Because they asked me if I could do it. I said, I ain't doing it. Just take it into the shipyard, take everybody out, and let them cut a section of the hull out, intact with a round in it, dump it at sea or blow it up somewhere else. But while this vessel, and I have to give that crew a lot of kudos. I mean, they've taken on 5 other units at the same time. My ship was one of them. All we were doing, because we were the senior officer afloat, we were SOPA, and that's all it means. We were putting up star shells to illuminate everything so everybody else could take this guy out. But he was taking everybody else out. Pretty impressive. I says, this guy is a tough son of a bitch. So while we're running star shells, the captain says, we'll take them under fire. And the guy loading the gun says, I got a star shell here. I says, shoot it. It was a direct hit. And that boat lit up from stem to stern because the white phosphorus in that star shell come out. And you could see the silhouette of the ship. But it's not an explosive round. It just makes light. And you could hear everybody in the ship, yay! No, wrong kind of round, man. Well, you have a clear shot now because you can see a perfect silhouette of this boat. So it started maneuvering, I'm sure, well, from us. It was been maneuvering the whole time, but now it has somebody else shooting at it. 385 goddamn rounds later, we finally blew the son of a bitch up. I mean, we were both maneuvering because we were shooting at each other the whole time. I don't know what the rest of them were doing because I think they were trying to save their ass. Literally, when you get shot out of the air, you have a problem and you're in the sea. Ain't nobody around to help pick your ass up. When your boat's sinking, same problem. You ain't got time to play combat. You trying to preserve yourself. So I think it was just, I don't know for sure. I know that 385 rounds of 5-inch later, we blew that son of a bitch up. Prettiest thing you ever did see. This is the explosion went up like a mushroom, but on the one side of the mushroom, you saw 1 boom, 2 boom, 3 boom. Just like when you go see fireworks display, when they go up and explode. I'm sure those were projectiles coming up out of their magazine, blowing up like that. They went down later where it blew up. The Navy sent divers down to see what was on the bottom. And it was, obviously, there were no survivors. We took a quick turnaround and looked and see just our own people were picking up because their vessels were all damaged and aircraft, they didn't float, but the people did. That's the way they make Mae West. But that recoilless rocket round I have came off of that boat. It was brought up from the bottom. And this is the kind of shit they were shooting at us, and that's okay. I mean, it's very effective. Throw it over your shoulder. It's like a bazooka for those people that don't know. Throw it over your shoulder, look down the sights, pull the trigger, and poof, that's where it goes.
How long did it take to sink from the time you started the fight? Wasn't it all night?
I would gonna say 385 rounds. That took us probably 6 hours of shooting back and forth. I mean, everybody's maneuvering, so you're getting a lot of near misses on both sides. That says when you look out the door of the gun and you see this white flame go, whoo, you know it's close. As simple as that. I've had misfires. Back then we had bad ammo being sent out overseas. I had to go to a special school to inspect the ammo before we even loaded it.
Misfires on the shell, not misfires on the powder.
Misfires on the powder.
How do you fix that?
You get rid of it, you jack that powder out, you get some guy to get out of the gun, stand on deck, hand it to him. He runs to the side of the ship and throws it into the ocean. In the meantime, we're putting another round in there and we shoot it. And whether he's back in the gun or not, we're shooting it. A lot of us went deaf.
That would be really loud.
It's loud as shit when you're right out there with it. I says, hell, I'm deaf. I blew my left eardrum out in my first tour, and I blew my second, and my right eardrum out in my second tour. I'm hard of hearing as hell. I wear stereo hearing aids. It says they don't help a hell of a lot, because all the moving parts are broke off inside. But I'm not the only one that lost hearing. Pretty much all of us, because the gun crew didn't change. Everybody had hearing loss, and then the guys I had running ammo out to throw it over the side. I said, during a firefight, I said, just stay the hell away from the barrel, because that's where it's loudest, and you don't want to get caught in a blast. I mean, it'll burn your ass to a crisp. So you always stay to the side or the back of the gun when you're out on the deck and I'm shooting. But I've thrown guys out of the gun when we had to evacuate for one reason or another. Literally, we have a hot shell shoot that empty brass comes, and you can't stop it. You don't want to try and stop it. It's coming out at 65 miles an hour. You just hit it and guide it down so it hits the deck and bounces around on deck. I've had guys I just threw out the hatch. Same thing. Just get them the hell out of the gun because they're in the way. They're freezing up or whatever. They're getting tired. It's a strength-consuming job when it lasts that long. And there is no, oh, we can get you relieved. No, that ain't happening. You're there for the duration, unless I personally put you out. Get out of here. And you ain't got time to climb out, so you go out the hot shell hatch with the hot shells. Hit the deck, roll away, get away from the gun. The next hot shell's coming out. That's combat. I mean, I've slept in my goddamn gun. A lot of us have. They're Diamond steel decks. They're not, well, they're sort of flat, but they're flat and they drop and they have different designs on them. You just lay down and sleep as much as you can, because while we're in a heavy combat situation, if there's a lull in the shooting, you can't leave the gun. You will stay there. So you catch a cat nap and then light them up again. So you do that for 4 to 6, 8 hours. It's a long day. And then you got to clean everything up. Gun's got to get cleaned and ready for the next time you're going to need it. And we had a Commodore who's a complete dickhead. Decided he wanted to have a inspection at 8 o'clock in the morning. We just came off the gun line at 6. We'd been shooting all goddamn night. There's goddamn brass everywhere. Machine gun brass, 50 caliber stuff. Empty tanks for the 81 millimeter mortars. And then we had the 5-inch powder tanks everywhere. Everybody is filthy, dirty, sweaty. And there's this dumbass standing on the pier. I'm going to have a personnel inspection. Dress blues and shiny shoes. That ain't what we wear here. That's Liberty clothes. We ain't on Liberty. But we did it. It used a lot of fresh water because everybody had to take a shower, and ships make their own water. So, had no choice. It took them another day and a half to fill the water tanks back up making water, because it ain't all that fast. Although a steamship can make it faster than a diesel ship. But yeah, we've had assholes like that. And I'm sure every service does.
On the 5-inch, how fast was the reload? What rounds per minute?
Theoretically, you can do 20 rounds a minute in a 5-inch cannon, but that's muscle power. Most people can't keep up 20 rounds a minute for maybe more than 5 minutes. Because it's all, projectile comes up, the powder comes up. The powderman grabs it, throws it in the tray, projectileman grabs it, throws it in the tray, slams it home, and it fires. It either automatic fire or the pointer, who's looking through a scope, pulls the trigger. As soon as he hears that slam shut, bang. Now the powder tanks, on average, the steel tanks weighed 22 pounds apiece. The projectiles on average were 55 pounds apiece. So if you're doing this for 5 minutes, you will get some shoulders on you. And if you're doing this for 5 minutes, your back's going to break because you're bent over. You go from down to up. It's like doing heavy-duty exercises. So you can probably keep 20 rounds a minute if you're in good shape for maybe 5 minutes. We had a kid named Stevenson. He had a growth spurt. From the time he signed on to the ship until we got to Vietnam, that kid went from about 5'9", 5'10", 120 pounds to 6'4", 185 pounds. He just, boom, exploded. Well, that dumb bastard takes some 5-inch projectiles with one hand, throws them in, and then shoots it. One hand, 55 pounds. He's a strong boy. And he could do it faster than the powderman who was running a 22-pound. Really, they're long tanks. They're bulky. But this guy had to have his powder in before the projectile went in. And I don't remember which Vietnamese port, but we were doing, throwing hand grenades over the side to keep divers away, so you don't get sappers in there putting limpet mines on your ship. And Stevenson takes a hand grenade and he throws it like a goddamn baseball. And that thing is airborne so long, I swear to God, and we all did, it was going to explode in the air before it hit the water. And that's 2 pounds he's throwing. It ain't a baseball, It ain't 6 ounces. That's how strong this sumbitch was. But I mean, he got a growth spurt, and he got huge all of a sudden. And then he'd go pick fights on the beach. Once he realized how strong he was, he didn't realize it until he was working in my gun. I said, damn. He'd pick fights with the Navy when we were on the beach. And he'd win. Of course, they didn't know they were going to be in a fight. He just up and two-block one of them, just sucker punch him. Hey, what? Bam! See what happens. See if he got back up or not, or any of his buddies jump on him, and most of them did not. But I've known 2 guys like that I served with. Well, I knew another one that he didn't start him because he was an officer. He'd just say something and let them start it, and then he'd take care of it. Known as Cowboy, he come from Wyoming. He used to break horses for a living. So he was a pretty stout guy, too.
What about from boot camp through the end of the second tour, the different weapons besides the knives, the K-bars, and the crappy M16s with their ammo?
Okay. Boot camp, they trained me on the M1 Thompson. They trained me on the M1 Garand. And as far as the Garand, I'm the only one that could shoot in my boot camp. I was the only one that could shoot it standing up, offhand shooting. Because I trained myself to do that to go deer hunting. So you don't always have something to kneel down behind or up alongside a tree. So you have to learn how to shoot standing up. So when we went to boot camp, they says, damn, you can shoot. Yeah, I taught myself. But I also had training on the riot gun, the Model 97 shotguns that have bayonet lugs and everything on them. Again, we had the training with the M1 Thompson machine guns. Nobody else did, but we still carried them. Fun gun to shoot. It really is. And then we also carried Winchester rifles, a specialty weapon. But, we ran bear loads in it, silver tips, in case we needed it. But that was boot camp. And then in my first ship, we actually had Ruger 22 handguns for target practice instead of using 45s. Not a good idea, but it's cheaper than shooting a 45. So we shoot the 22s, and everybody felt pretty good about shooting this Ruger. I always thought it was a piece of crap. But I mean, the damn magazines, they've been, 100,000 rounds later, magazines are falling apart. They would split. They're junk. But they wouldn't rotate new magazines. The gun held up. The magazines didn't. When they split, it'd jam the damn gun. The slided jam back, halfway back, or wouldn't open, or you had to pull the magazine out. It was a piece of shit. Those are Ruger 1 and 2. I have never, ever liked Ruger 22 semi-automatics ever since. I just don't trust the goddamn things. That's personal. And I know it was a magazine, but that's personal. I like high standards. I've never had a failure, magazine or otherwise, from a high standard. We did shoot the 45s because if you needed it, we had to do semi-annual and annual shoots just to show proficiency. No, it didn't make any difference if you were a cook, if you were a pencil pusher, a yeoman, a storekeeper. These are the people that just work in log books and order shit. They're non-combatants. The only thing they do is when a load of ammunition comes on, they stand in line and move ammo. When commissary stores come on, they stand in line and move food. Other than that, that's it. They just have a secretarial type of job, except for the cooks. The cooks, on the other hand, if you ever looked at the Beetle Bailey comics, they've got a cook in there they call Cookie. We had a guy in my first ship that I swear to God, they used him to make that cartoon, except for the cauliflower ears on Cookie. This guy didn't have cauliflower ears. They were spitting images of each other, though. He'd come up out of commissary stores with bags of flour, and these things are huge. One under each arm, come up a ladder that's about that steep. I mean, the guy looked just like Cookie, swear to God. I'm trying to think of what the hell his name was. He was a machine gun crew. But he could shoot that 50 caliber like nobody. But he had the bulk. He must have weighed 250, 280 pounds. That machine gun didn't hardly move him. He could shoot it like a rifle. Anywhere he wanted it to go, that's where it went. Very, very good machine gunner. He was on the fantail, one of the fantail machine guns. But that was his job. The cooks all did that. They all part of gun crew. Small arms, not heavy guns. And that's just a breakdown of a ship, at least in the Coast Guard at the time. I don't know. Because they don't use gunner's mates. Gunner's mates are historically, we maintain the guns, we don't shoot the guns. We're available, we're mechanics. That's our primary job. But when I was in Vietnam, the guy that was in charge of the gun that I was maintaining, this good old boy from the South had coal black hair, and by the time we got back, he had white hair, scared to death of the gun, of being shot at and everything else. So I had to relieve him, and I took over his position in the gun. I was going to be there anyway to fix it. So, I mean, that's just the evolution. Certain people don't fit the job that they're supposed to do, so you put somebody else who fits the job, even though that's not their assigned place. Because you don't expend your gunner's mates because you need them as repair people, floating repair people. Fix machine guns, fix mortars, fix hedgehogs, torpedoes. Speaking of torpedoes, there's a picture of me shooting a torpedo. God, it was great. I almost sank a Canadian submarine for real, because we were doing war games with international war games, and the Canadian sub was tracking us. And we knew it. because we could hear their pings, because our sonar picks them up. And my gun boss, who was an ensign, says, "What do you got that'll take out that Canadian?" I says, "What do you want?" I says, "You want me to do a near miss or hit it or what?" "Oh, see if you can hit it." I says, "Okay." So I loaded Mark 46 torpedoes. A shipboard torpedo hits the water, drops 50 feet, and then starts making a circle down for a couple hundred yards. What it's doing is shooting pings out, and it's finding the depth of wherever your submarine is. Submarines shoot torpedoes that come up to 50 feet or 30 feet and do the same thing, goes around to the surface looking for a ship. That prevents you from shooting yourself with your own torpedo. Ships, they go down, subs, they go up. So my Mark 46 went down, found the sub, zeroed in, takes off for the sub. They hear it coming in. They hit what's called anti-countermeasures. It's a jamming device in the water that scrambles the electronic brain. Torpedo makes a turn and goes away, goes somewhere else. Guy stops that. He's already reported to his skipper that there's an incoming torpedo. So they hit the ECM. Torpedo turns away. I guess they were shooting the shit for a second, saying, what a near miss it was, but we got it. Well, the torpedo turned around, acquired a target, and come back in again, which kind of got their attention. ECM. Torpedo goes around, takes off again. And they're discussing what the hell's going on. And my torpedo comes around a third time. They didn't catch that one. And hit him in the propeller shaft and bent it. So the first thing that happened, the sub went completely off kilter because this propeller's still spinning. Now it's got a bent axle basically because the propeller shaft's doing this shit. The torpedo has a 500-pound weight in the nose of it because it's a practice. They take the explosive warhead off and replace it with a 500 block of lead. Well, that's coming in at 32 knots, it bent the shit out of that shaft. So the sub has a choice. It comes up right away or it's going to sink because it's taking in seawater through the engine room in the back. Not a good deal for the sub. So it did what's called a Navy log. It just dives. Instead of a dive, it comes up at like a 45-degree angle, full power, breaks water. They were pissed. Captain wanted to see the captain of my boat. Okay. Gave him a ladder. I mean, literally a ladder, like an extension ladder from the boat to the submarine. You got to step on the rungs. Well, that's not how ships normally transfer people. They have companion ways, gangways, whatever you want to call them. It's on wheels on either end, and you can walk across it, and it's got rails on it for your hands. And if the ship's in port, it's got canvas on the side getting the name of the ship and just shit like that. But I gave him a ladder. So he got himself on the ship, and I took him up to the captain's cabin, and he was smoking hot. And I got called on the carpet later, and I says, "The hell did you shoot at him?" I said, "Mark 46. I says, "Why?" I says, "I was given a choice. My gun boss," I says, the ensign, whoever it was at the time, I asked him, what do you want me to shoot?" He says, "What can you hit it with?" I says, "You pick it." So I did. I says, I had a 42, a 44, and a 46. I had a choice of 3 different marking mods. They all do different things in the water. I says, "I'm the only one on the ship that reads Ruditort, which is a magazine put out by the Navy for anti-submarine warfare. That was one of the things that I was in charge of, was the torpedo tubes and the torpedoes. So I picked one. It says they just screwed up and they didn't continue to monitor. You know, this thing will run for 10 minutes before the seawater battery craps out. And then it goes to the bottom. And when it hits the bottom, that 500-pound chunk of lead will break loose, and then the whole thing will float back to the surface. They recover the torpedo body, clean it out, reassess it, see if there's anything wrong, and reload it with a real warhead and reissue it. Because you didn't blow it up. I mean, all you did was get it wet with seawater, but it's got to be cleaned out with fresh water. So they didn't find me at fault. But you can't do that anymore. It says, well, then you tell me what you want me to shoot. And don't give me the option. It says, I know what to shoot to sink a goddamn submarine. So they wouldn't give us any nukes. It says, God damn. Although we had the capabilities of carrying nukes, the Navy decided not to let the Coast Guard have nuclear torpedoes. So that was a Mark 48. The only difference between them and any of the other ones that the warhead on it was painted purple. Visually let you know you got a nuke. And I don't know how the Navy loads it. I'm sure they use all the equipment that torpedoes are supposed to be loaded with. Inside the torpedo magazine is an overhead crane so they can pick the torpedoes up, put them down, and then you got a torpedo tray on wheels. You can wheel it over the tubes. The tubes are in a cluster of 3, one on the top, 2 on the bottom. I use the old-fashioned way, and I could load a torpedo in 1 minute. You come up with 2 belly straps and 4 guys, one on each side of each belly strap. You pick the torpedo up and walk it over to the tube, and somebody open that tube up and just walk it right in. The space between the torpedo tubes and the torpedo magazine was maybe 10 yards. I mean, I could load them faster than the Navy could, and I did it. I wasn't relying on any crane shit, you know, no block and tackle and that crap. We did it by hand. And it's only 500-pound, you know, piece of machinery. Some of them were 800 pounds, but 4 big guys, you pick it up.
Isn't there a piece of paper in here that says you have to report to the brig for something? I thought you got in a fight.
No, nothing in here. These are just places I've been, things I've done, and there's more in boxes that there ain't enough ceiling space. But, I've been on brig patrols where I had to take people to the brig and pick them up from the brig, but not me. I mean, I was the designated guard. I've taken people at Camp Lejeune. That was interesting. I had a guy that I had picked up. They called me into the captain's quarters. Says, you got to take this guy to the brig. I said, okay. Which brig? He's going to Lejeune. I said, okay, fine. So we took him to Camp Lejeune. And I told the guy, he says, what's going to happen if I escape? I says, you won't escape. I says, why do you say that? I says, because I'll shoot you. And we're going down through Camp Lejeune, and the area we're in was their brig. And they had all the prisoners out for exercise. And here's this jarhead sergeant. And some guy makes a break for it. And we're driving by, and this guy takes off. And he just goes, down! And everybody dropped, and he goes, I says, that's how it works. Shot him. It's right on the spot. It says, welcome to Camp Lejeune. It says, this is where you're at. And it says, you know what he did? I can do that to you, and it's legal. Because if I let you escape, I have to go to the brig in your place until you're recovered. And that ain't happening. But they used to have me take prisoners all the time. And I still, the only reason I can think of that I was always selected for this was because I was a gunner's mate. I was always armed. I was trained. I used to be a weapons instructor for 26 goddamn years. I could shoot whatever gun. Been trained on every damn thing that we owned. And I taught it all. But I was always a designated, you get yourself a driver, you're the guard, and this guy's going to prison. What for? Well, this one's going to prison for murder. That was in Baltimore. That was kind of a rough spot. You go down to the block. It's a famous area. It's a sleazy area. It's full of bars. It's full of hookers. You go down to a bar. You may or may not get out without getting your ass beat. You may or may not get out without getting a Mickey. I got a Mickey in Hong Kong. Put me out like a light for 4 hours. But it didn't put me down. That's another story. I'll tell you about it in a second. But Maryland was a tough place. Found guns hidden up inside the cooling system, the ducts, because the black guys on the ship, and the ship was probably 50 or 60% black. There's a huge black community in Maryland. So we got the same on the ship. I mean, the same ratio. It's just local guys getting transferred in and out. And one of the black groups tried to hire me to make a machine gun. I says, nah, I ain't doing that. I said, I know how. Very much on the lines of a Sten gun or a Bren gun. Very simple to make. You don't even need real good machining. You can just use a piece of pipe and do the same thing. But, yeah, the one guy we took down to the brig for murder, where he knifed some guy 32 times. He says, I didn't do it. Okay, well, it's your knife, it's full of blood, you're full of blood, you didn't do it. Okay, fine. But you're going to the brig, I don't know, you got 50 years or some shit like that. Basically life imprisonment, as they would call it, except this is a military court-martial. They don't call it life imprisonment. It's got a finite time. The time you get out, you'll be 88 years old, if you live that long. But I used to make brig runs frequently. I came off of Liberty one night, 3-piece suit, half in the bag, been drinking, out carousing, and they were just waiting for me to get back to the ship so I could make a brig run at 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, what the hell? I says, how about the master at arms? No. Why not? Well, he's a bosun mate, so we're all in the same boat together. I mean, we're literally on the same ship together. Do basically the same job. Our personal jobs, and bosun mate's in charge of all the evolutions of the ship. I'm in charge of all the weapons and crap on the ship, and that was another icebreaker, so I was also in charge of all the munitions on a ship and explosives. And we all had a job. Cooks are in charge of cooking chow, but we all have the same job at sea, no matter what our primary job is. But no, I'm the designated, take them to the brig. So I got Jerry Weiner, who was my best man. At the time, he was just a shipmate, but he was my best man at my wedding. And I said, okay, I'll drive for you. He was a bosun mate. I put this guy in there in handcuffs. And at the time, I'd already seen the movie with Jack Nicholson where he took a guy to the brig. And this kid in the movie, I forget what the hell he'd done, but Jack Nicholson took him to whorehouse and everything all along the way until they got to the brig and then turned him over so he could see life as it should have been for him. He did everything. It's called The Last Detail. That's the name of the movie. So I told this guy, I says, okay, this is what we're going to do. I says, you're going to sit on my left because my handgun's on my right. And if you make an attempt to escape, I says, I will shoot you dead. I don't have a problem with that. Well, yeah, you do. You can't do that. You want to bet? I can do that. I'm under arms. I have direct orders to take you to the brig. The part that doesn't come out in bold print says dead or alive. I don't care. It's your choice. But I will shoot you. You can't shoot me in the back. Bigger target. And it says, you come out that door, your back is at me, and it says, and you'll get one right between the shoulder blades. You'll be dead before you hit the ground. It'll go right through your back. I don't care. I said, well, how do you think you can do that? I said, I just spent 2 goddamn combat tours shooting people. I says, I can do that. I don't have a problem doing that. I don't know you from squat. I was detailed and brought in off of Liberty to take your dumb ass to the brig, and that's where you're going. Okay. It was like 5 or 6 hour, 7 hour drive to get there. I don't remember which brig it was, but it was way to hell and gone away from where the ship was. And I did give him a break. I says, you don't do this, I'll let you do that, because I want to sleep. I says, I ain't been to sleep for 24 fucking hours. I've been out drinking. I says, I got things to do, like take a piss and this and that, and I want to get a couple hours sleep and get some coffee later. So he complied. And then I turned him into the brig. And it was actually it was a stockade. I took him to the Army. Because the first thing I noticed was, God, these guys dress sloppy. They're in full uniform. They look like shit. I couldn't believe it. There's a complete difference between the Army stockade and the Marine brig. The Marines look sharp. They look like I'm ready for combat. The Army looked like the goddamn U.S. postal carriers. Jesus Christ. What a difference. And it's the same job. And I'm a courier. I mean, I'm not in dress blues. I was in undress blues, underarm. Means I have a arm badge says MP, gun on my right, white belt, so it stands out. I just didn't have to wear the white spats that a lot of them did. But I mean, I've intermixed with the other services with the exception of the Air Force. I never went to an Air Force stockade because they're way too far and gone inland compared to where the ships are. But and the Army has got more ships or boats than the Coast Guard does. And their Marine side of the Army, which nobody knows about, is bigger than the Coast Guard's. And this Coast Guard's 385,000 people, which is smaller than the New York City police force, and we're worldwide. So we do a lot of things, wear a lot of hats, do a lot of jobs. My job in the Coast Guard would have been a minimum of 3 different jobs in the Navy. It's the cross-training we do.
Anything else you want to?
Well, I could tell you sea stories, but that's just, shooting the shit, drinking beer, sea stories.
I guess before we're done, what about the rice paddy one with the?
Oh shit! Yeah, that was funnier than hell. We're bombarding the shoreline and seeing what we were doing through binoculars and shit. You were using these 12-power binoculars that you have to put on a tripod so you don't move them because you lose your sight instantly. And back in the day, everything was made with brass. Everything's made with steel now. Well, they keep the brass because of the resale value. That's money. We had a 5-inch projectile land soft in a rice paddy. So this Vietnamese farmer goes and digs it up. And the nose cone is brass, shiny brass. The body is steel. And he's trying to get this goddamn nose cone off. So he's got a little hammer. You can hear him go tink, tink. I mean, it's quiet. Deathly quiet out there. Any sound will travel and you can hear it. And that's before I became deaf. Tink, 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 tink on this nose cone. Well, that's the fuse. That's the point detonating fuse. And then there's a base detonating fuse at the other end. And then some of the projectiles have an internal fuse. So if it tumbled and it hit sideways, it'll still explode. But a soft landing in a rice paddy is full of mud. You know, it's knee deep in muck. Tink, tink, tink. Boom! That son of a bitch disappeared off the face of the earth. The funniest damn thing. I ain't shitting you. That was almost as funny as a guy I blew up 9 miles away. They ain't supposed to do that. It says that ain't within the Geneva Conventions. It says the North Vietnamese did not sign the Geneva Conventions. Therefore, I'm not obligated. This is my thinking. It says you ain't supposed to point it at people. 50 caliber and below, you can point at people. Anything bigger than that, you're not supposed to. But again, they didn't sign the Geneva Convention for warfare. And there are rules and regulations concerning warfare. We have to be shot at first before we can return fire. We cannot, this is a crock of shit, but that's okay. That's the way it's set up. First they shoot you and kill a bunch of guys, and then you can shoot back and kill a bunch of their guys. No, I don't think so. But, I say, it wasn't a problem as far as most of us were concerned because they never signed it. We have, years ago, and they have never signed the Geneva Convention for warfare.
All right, well, we're going to stop it for a moment and then get pictures and video of all the...
Oh, the different plaques?
They're all over the place.
I got a box full of them that never got put up.
Yeah, they're all around.
Yeah. And you can narrate that that's training ammunition.
What, armor piercing?
Yeah, I mean, it's real ammo.
Yeah, it's armor piercing.
That teaches the grunts, whether to be Marines or Army, how to crawl on their belly under barbed wire and shit when they shoot above them. That's the ammo.
Armor piercing, just so you know.
Yeah, it doesn't blow them up, just makes a hole.
All the way through. For... even if you're wearing a flak jacket.
Yep.
Yeah.
It'll go through your rucksack on your back, or it'll go through any fucking thing you're wearing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Slick shit.
All right, we'll do that, and we'll move the lighting, and get some footage of this, and
pictures of me with hair.
So.
And a short beard. That's only a 30-day beard.
All right, ready?
Yep. This is a picture of my boot camp graduating class, Mike 44. Me in the middle, we all looked the same back then. This is my first seagoing trip out when I had hair, and that's a 30-day-old beard. I've been shaving since I was 11. This is the Coast Guard cutter Eagle. It's during reparations after World War II, we took this from the Germans. I don't remember what the German name for it, but it was a training ship for their cadets, and it's a training ship for our cadets. Of course, these are just the things that you find on a ship, barometers, compasses. It's just set up nautical. You can buy them anywhere. And then just little oddball things. Back in the day, as an officer, I used to have to carry business cards. So this is a Coast Guard business card for Gunner Lewis. That's what I'm known as, simply because that is an official title. And then normal oddball things. This is a Jaguar from the Coast Guard run by the United Kingdom. We used to train on Governor's Island, New York, all the other countries' Coast Guard. They have adopted Coast Guards throughout the world, and we got them all for training. It took a few years to train everybody, but almost anywhere, if they have a seagoing port, they will have the Coast Guard, and they have the same color scheme as we do. They don't have the same racing stripe as we do. They may have it midships, and they certainly won't have our Coast Guard emblem in it, but it will say Coast Guard somewhere on there from whatever country. They've adopted the whole thing. It is a non-military unit. Ours, on the other hand, we are a military unit. This is just a series of lighters I've got, the different ships I've been on. And then the lighter I used all the time, I took a pocket knife like this and engraved all the ports of call that I've been in, front, back, top. I've got all the different districts I've been stationed in, and my nickname is when I was a kid was Butch. However, when I was in the service, my nickname became the Gunner because it's an actual title. And I'm still known as that everywhere. In addition to having a kind of a oddball, when I've been around the world 3 times lighter, when I was a quartermaster, I've been a quartermaster and I've been a bosun mate and I've been a gunner's mate. I carved a pipe. Because I used to smoke a pipe or a cigars. And of course, everybody has to have a ship and a bottle. You ain't a sailor if you don't. So all this is stuff that you would see in any sailor's household. This is one that my son Derek made, the flag, give it to his mother. And that is just a copy of the Black Pearl from the movies. Oh, this is the keel-laid plaque for what was the USS Edisto. It was a Navy icebreaker. When the Navy got out of the icebreaking business and the Coast Guard continued it, the ship was turned over to the Coast Guard and it became the United States Coast Guard cutter Edisto. And when I decommissioned that ship, I was the last person off of it, nobody had taken the plaque. So I unbolted it, put it in my sea bag, and off I went. And I have it. I'm also a plank owner for another icebreaker, which means that was part of the original crew that stepped aboard that ship, took it through sea trials, and took it out to sea for the first time. There's no plaque like that. We just get a certificate that says you're a plank owner.
That one.
Yeah.
You got a special zippo.
I don't know if you can see it, but it does say plank owner on the lighter. That was my second icebreaker. In the community, it's known as Big Red because it's a red painted ship. You can see it against the ice, which may sound kind of odd, but if you get up in the ice or down in the ice, if you're Arctic or the Antarctic, you get snow blind, ice blind. You can't see. You need something with a contrasting color. Red. You can always see the red. So if you're in an aircraft, because we take pilots up in helicopters and scout around looking for thin ice that we can go through, they can find the ship because they get the same problem. And it's kind of dangerous if you're out there where you can't find your way home.
About the certificates.
Well, this is actually just a box similar to the one over here, only that one's got my father-in-law's flag when he died. He was in the Army. But these are various knots that we'd always use, same as that one there. Those are standard knots used for any sailor. This is called a knot board.
And what about the certificates?
Okay, this certificate says I retired. What they don't tell you is that after I retired after 26 years, I was on a list to be re-enlisted into the service until I was 65. I got a letter when I was 65 that says I'm no longer on a recall list. I said, okay. But if I'd have been recalled, when I left the service, I was making $33,000 a year. If I'd have been recalled, my pay would have gone to $76,000 a year. So I was ready to go. It's a big pay raise. Same job. And the other one is for the wife, because she was with me while I was in the service. She too got a certificate when I retired. Okay. Again, the knot board.
What about the sword and dagger?
Okay. I was a commissioned officer. This is a commissioning knot. They're actually gold thread, and that's the sword. And the swords are all different from service to service. The Marines have a sword with a swoop in it, and the other services all have a straight rapier-type blade. But only the commissioned officers carry these. You go into a full-dress parade, carry your sword. And there's certain sword commands that you use to pull them out. Same as if you carry a rifle, they have certain commands. You'll see them in parades where they throw a rifle back and forth from one shoulder to the other, and park it down at their side. Well, the officers would do the same, similar things, but different with their swords. And now that I'm 4 inches shorter than I used to be, it's hard to draw that, because that sword hasn't changed by length, but I have. And the machine gun bullets up here, these are training rounds, they're real rounds. But this is what they train the grunts with, how to crawl on their belly, because they shoot above them. They'll shoot 2 and 3 foot up in the air, in a straight line, and they crawl underneath, and they can hear these snapping by, because it's real ammo. But it's all armor piercing, so if you're wearing a knapsack, haversack, or whatever on your back, it'll go right through it. It doesn't care. But if you accidentally get shot, same thing. It'll go right through you. And it's a smaller wound to take care of. But most everything here is Coast Guard related. There was a captain on Governor's Island when I was stationed there who carved that eagle with a hammer and a chisel. The guy was a very good woodworker. And I won that in a raffle. And he presented it because he made it. And again, that's my father-in-law's flag when they buried him. And up above are various plaques, awards that I've acquired over 26 years. And they're not all here, they're just some. I've got a box full. They're a real pain to put up on the ceiling. But this whole area has got a nautical theme, you know, from the light switch was disconnected just for this shoot, but it's got a lighthouse. The fan switch is an anchor. Again, everything's nautical because of the amount of time I spent in the Coast Guard. And I was not in the life-saving side of the Coast Guard. I was on the ships, either in the ice, in the Arctic, and the Antarctic. I've been both. Or playing war games, which is what we used to do way back when it was the Revenue Cutter Service. and they ran ships down that had sails.